Greetings. We're in week 6 of the course. It's entitled Enabling Others to Act. And this lecture gives you a little bit of information supplementary to the 2 chapters you're reading this week. And of course, it all focuses on how we interact with others, particularly as leaders, how we have a positive impact on the people around us. So I wanted to start off by talking about Kurt Lewin. It's Lewin. Often we say Lewin, but he is from Austria originally, so Lewin is the European pronouncement. Well, anyway, he's considered the kind of founder of organizational behavior, or the father of organizational behavior in a lot of circles. And when he came over from Europe in order to avoid Hitler, he ended up working in the universities in the U.S. and then went on to start some other organizations, which became more in the professional and addressing the corporate world. But a lot of Lewin's studies were based in universities. And the Iowa studies that's one popular set of studies that he conducted, where they worked with groups of boys who were like young, like 12 to 13-year-old boys, and they formed 3 groups, and they provided different types of leadership styles to each group. One group was a democratic leadership style, the other was authoritarian, and the third was a laissez-faire. So out of these this arrangement, many different conclusions were drawn, and I wanted to share 2 or 3 of them with you. First was that the authoritarian leadership group, the members of that group, after a while they started exhibiting more acting out behaviors, and the level of anxiety and stress was higher for the group. So it was noticeably different than the other 2 groups, that anxiety was kind of a fruit, if you will, of an authoritarian leadership style. In the democratic group, of course, there was less anxiety and more the high performance, which was not accompanied by feeling as much stress or anxiety. So when they switched the governance styles on the groups at some point, to notice, what would happen if we changed the leadership style. And so one thing that came out of that was they noticed that the ones who had been previously in an authoritarian style, once they were switched to a democratic leadership style, they were not able to begin performing. It took them longer to begin performing because they were used to somebody telling them what to do. So they had become accustomed to that, and therefore their self-management capacity, it took longer for them to kind of realize that, oh yes, we should be self-managing, that's what's expected, let's start self-managing. So that is something to keep in mind as well, is when people are given more autonomy than they're used to, it takes a while for them to kind of grow into it. So there's a learning curve with learning how to be more independent. And that brings me to the last point here, is that, in fact, when you have given a group more autonomy, then it may not look like you expect at first. So you have to give the group time and recognize that the way their democratic process looks may not be neat or tidy. It may not be well oiled at first, but you don't want to intervene too quickly, because that's a part of the process of them figuring things out. And in fact, some groups may never look as tidy as what we would expect, because maybe their members are just used to their styles may be more less linear, I guess is one way to say it. They may be quite innovative, and they might jump all over the place with their ideas, and the way they get things done may look differently than what we would expect. Lastly, the laissez-faire group, in general, they did not develop skills the way the other two groups did, or they didn't function as well because they had a lack of leadership. They had the democratic leadership would intervene only to give constructive guidance. The authoritarian leadership would be micromanaging everything. And under laissez-faire, there's nothing. So no guidance, no micromanaging, there's nothing. So that group, they demonstrated that under that lack of leadership, performance will not be as high. So a democratic leader provides critical input, but not micromanaging. Okay, let's transition then to the other theory that our person I wanted to introduce is Douglas McGregor. He wrote a book, The Human Side of Enterprise, in the late 50s, and then he was a consultant throughout the 60s. I'm pretty sure he was from Boston in the Harvard and MIT area. And so he would consult with managers on something he called Theory X, Theory Y. And so Theory X, this whole idea is that as a leader or manager, we have assumptions about the people that we're leading or managing. So it's Theory X assumptions refer to managers or leaders who think that their people do not really care about personal motivation, that those people do not want to work harder than is necessary. Those people do not want to be challenged or stretched beyond their comfort zone. Those people do not want to understand the bigger picture of the organization beyond what they do, only what they do. Those people do not care about the success of the organization beyond their individual well-being. They just want to get a check and do their job and move on. Those people would expect more authoritarian styles. They wanted somebody to tell them what to do. And those people would expect to be corrected by somebody else when they made a mistake. So all of these are considered negative assumptions about people. So that's how a Theory X manager looks at at their staff, is a bunch of people who are basically like I just described. So what happens based on those assumptions is the Theory X manager will begin micromanaging and correcting people, closely monitoring people, hovering over people, pouncing on behaviors that they see, giving negative feedback, limiting people within narrow boundaries, showing paltry expectations for their staff members, not sharing expanded information with their staff members, and generally doing things that would stress people out, such as was proven in Lewin's experiment with the authoritarian group. So based on those Theory X assumptions, the manager will treat people that way and will create stress because nobody likes to be treated that way. On the other hand, Theory Y managers, they contain positive assumptions about people, that people and staff members value their own sense of motivation. People want to work hard. People want to be challenged and stretched to new competencies and skills. People care deeply about the bigger picture and the welfare of the larger organization. People expect to monitor and correct themselves. People expect to be given autonomy and to be responsible with it. So all of those are more positive assumptions about people. And based on those assumptions, managers will give space and challenges to challenging jobs to people. They'll allow people to self-correct, they will share more information with people, they will set broader opportunities, and basically do things that inspire people. So the theory why managers are driven by these assumptions, and therefore their behaviors towards staff members are more inspiring. So McGregor would consult about the idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy, that when you have a theory X manager, if we think this way about people and we start behaving based on our assumptions, that we are actually cultivating less motivated employees who want to avoid the manager and who will begin exhibiting the behaviors that the manager has assumed. So if we're micromanaging, people will start to, roll their eyes. They will start to they'll start to want to avoid the manager. They don't like the unpleasantness that the manager is exuding because the manager thinks all those negative things. So they will start, exhibiting negative behaviors. It's not because that's who they are. It's because they are avoiding the manager who is bothering them. And so then the manager sees those behaviors and says, aha, I knew it. I told you that's how they were. They don't want to work. They avoid me. They have a bad attitude. So in that way, the self-fulfilling prophecy becomes of it, so that people start behaving in a way that reinforces the negative assumptions. On the other hand, when a theory Y manager starts giving the space to people and starts treating them in certain ways, those people will experience achievements and accomplishments that will bring them to a higher spirit, so to speak, a higher level of performance, and they will be more motivated to share their work with the manager, explain how they did things and the challenges and how they overcame them. And so they are generally more pro-social and happier and satisfied and accomplished people. And that reinforces the positive assumptions the manager has about them. So that too becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's what McGregor would consult about, is really getting into the heads of the managers and asking, what are your assumptions about people, and how are those assumptions directing your behavior, and how is your behavior really affecting people? And so those are the things that I wanted to contribute through the lecture this week. And your discussion question will reference some of this material. And then there are a couple of videos that also talk about Herzberg's dual factor theory. It's another motivation theory. And then there is a really, I find, quite inspiring video from a military person who was a leader in a submarine, and that video is quite inspiring. And so out of all these things, your discussion this week will ask you to talk about, integrate some of this information into your discussion. So we'll look forward to seeing those discussions, and we're carrying on into week 6.